Hey friends. Tonight, we begin not with a scream, but with a silence. A silence hidden beneath the marble spires of the Vatican. Not the kind of silence found in prayer halls or empty cathedrals, but the kind that clings to cold stone, dust-coated, books and secrets never meant to surface. So, before we begin, go ahead, dim your lights. Let the hush of the night settle around you, and maybe, just maybe, check that your door is locked. Not because anything's coming, but because someone, somewhere, once thought it was better that way. This story begins in 1639, in the heart of the Papal States, when Europe was busy tearing itself apart with pikes, politics, and plagues, while armies clashed and thrones shifted. Behind Vatican walls, another kind of battle unfolded. Not over land, but over knowledge, and the man at the center of it. A forgotten figure, a quiet, hunched soul by the name of Brother Matteo del Verna. You won't find his name in official records, not anymore. He was an archivist, which is just a fancy way of saying he spent most of his life underground, both literally and figuratively. The Vatican archives, yes, those ones are older than you think, more guarded than you know, and deeper than anyone dares admit. Matteo's job was simple: copy old texts, catalog forbidden books, and most importantly, never ask why some pages were chained shut or inked in languages no living priest could read. But Matteo asked. Not out loud, of course. He wasn't stupid. He just lingered. He read between lines. He touched the margins others ignored. And that's where the story begins, not in a grand revelation, but in a smudge. A single ink smear. On a vellum scroll, dated for 97 AD. He noticed it one morning, under the flicker of oil light, a Latin manuscript, brittle with age, chronicling the burial rites of St. Gelasius. Routine, boring even. But there it was. A strange mark, not in Latin, not even Roman. A glyph curved, like a serpent, swallowing its tail, and next to it, a phrase, for words. Simple, uneventful. Viditer, sub terra dormirai. It seems to sleep beneath the earth. Most archivists would have turned the page. Matteo didn't. He turned instead to Codex for 3X, the so-called Index of Suppressed Testimonies. A book never spoken of, even among archivists. Kept in a locked alcove, behind a false panel, behind a curtain that always seemed heavier than it should have been. It was bound in black goatskin, and sealed with a clasp, made of human bone ore, so the rumors said Matteo opened it, and the entry was there, half-effaced: a name, a location, a warning: Archivum Silenti, Custoditor, Sub Signum, Galatium, the Archive of Silence, guarded under the sign of Galatia. It didn't say what was kept there, only that it wasn't supposed to be found. Now, you might be thinking, why not stop? Why not close the book and walk away? Because that's not how silence works. Real silence doesn't just quiet the air, it beckons. It pulls. So Matteo followed the trail not through books this time, but through walls. He began measuring the layout of the archive chambers, comparing blueprints that didn't match. He traced steps where corridors ended too abruptly, where air felt cooler without reason. Until, one night, past midnight, while the rest of the priests slept and Rome dreamed beneath a blanket of fog, he found it. A door dot, not ornate, not grand, just wrong. Its wood was darker than any surrounding timber, almost black, like ash soaked in ink. It had no knob, no handle, only a carved emblema, keyhole shaped like that serpent glyph, and beside it, etched faintly into the stone, a single line: the ones who see must forget, the ones who guard must never sleep. The next day Matteo feigned illness. He didn't show up to morning mass. He didn't transcribe the relic inventory. Instead, he went to the smithy near the Jewish quarter, and for a few coins and a quiet favor, he had a key made. Not just any key, a replica of that glyph. Based on the mark he copied onto parchment, traced again and again until it felt familiar. Like muscle memory from a dream you shouldn't remember. That night, he returned, the key fit. And what lay beyond was not an archive. It was a descent. The steps curved down like a nautilus shell, swallowing torchlight with every turn. Walls wept with condensation, and the air grew colder, older, as if each breath descended a century. There were no markings, no lights, only the faint hum, faint, but steady like a choir singing far below, beneath the stone. He reached the bottom after 78 steps, he counted. There, in the flickering glow of his oil lamp, the hallway opened into a chamber, circular, silent, with shelves upon shelves of scrolls, not labeled in Latin, but in an older tongue, a language Matteo did not know, but somehow understood. He stepped forward, and that's when he saw it. A mirror tall, framed in bronze, standing alone, untouched by dust. But this wasn't an ordinary mirror. It didn't reflect him. It reflected something else. The room, but not as it was. The shelves looked rotted. The scrolls bled ink. And standing just behind his shoulder, visible only in the reflection, was a second Matteo. Eyes blank, mouth stitched shut. The real Matteo. Spun. Nothing behind him. The mirror, still, reflected both. He reached out, tentatively, and touched its surface, and the other Matteo blinked now. Let's pause here. Take a deep breath. Exhale slowly. This is where most stories would end their first chapter. But the real ones, the ones buried beneath centuries of dust and denial, they only start here. Matteo backed away, not because he feared the mirror, no, not yet, but because he felt something else. A tremor, subtle, like a memory, awakening in the stones. And behind one of the shelves, he saw movement, not from a rat, not from a draft, from a book. It moved, it unlatched itself, and as Matteo watched in terrified awe, it slid forward, as if pushed by unseen fingers. He opened it, slowly, page by page, and on the final sheet, written in the same ink as that smudged glyph, was a warning. When this seal is broken, so is the dream, and what dreams beneath, remembers. Matteo looked up. The mirror had gone dark. His reflection was gone, and footsteps echoed behind him, not fast, not loud, but measured, like someone or something that had just awakened and remembered. Sleep well, friends, because in the next part, we follow Matteo deeper into the second level of the Archive of Silence, a place that no key was meant to unlock, where mirrors don't reflect, books don't sleep, and the dead don't always forget. If you're brave enough to return, I'll be waiting. A chamber beneath the Vatican that had no name, only a mirror that didn't reflect, scrolls that bled, and footsteps that didn't belong to him. Tonight, we descend further, so settle in. Let the room grow still. And if there's a mirror near you, maybe, turn it toward the wall. You don't need it tonight. The footsteps stopped, but the sound stayed, somehow. Silence had become a presence, breathing, waiting, watching. Matteo stood frozen in the Archive of Silence, his fingers still resting on the edge of that unnatural book. The page with the warning pulsed faintly under his touch, as if inked with something warmer than ink. He whispered the words aloud. When this seal is broken, so is the dream, and what dreams beneath, remembers. Then, the mirror flickered. Just for a heartbeat, but it was enough to see his other self return. Only this time, it wasn't still. The second Matteo, the one with the sewn mouth, was moving it. Raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and pointed toward a section of the chamber Matteo hadn't explored yet, a corridor. Previously hidden behind one of the tall scroll cabinets, now shifted, as if it had never intended to stay hidden from him. The path was too narrow for comfort, and the oil in his lantern was nearly spent. Still, he moved forward, because this was no longer about curiosity. This was summoning. The corridor descended. Again, tighter spiral steps. Steeper, wetter. The smell changed, less like dust, more like soil. The air grew warmer, but not with life. It felt old, the way ancient breath might, if it could linger across centuries. The walls were carved, not built, not with bricks or mortar. These had been bored into the earth itself, chiseled by something with very steady hands and a long, patient plan. Matteo counted 60 steps before the passage leveled and opened into a second chamber. If the first chamber had been strange, this one was wrong. It didn't resemble an archive. It resembled a cathedral, but inverted. The ceiling was low. The floor arched like a vault, and in the center sat a stone well. No rope, no pulley, just a black circle, rimmed with teeth-like stones. Along the walls, relics rested on shelves, each encased in glass, not crosses, not saints, faces, 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 dozens of them. Carved from wood, bone, bronze each, frozen in expressions of extreme emotion. One sobbed, one screamed, one grinned, too widely. And they weren't decorative. Each mask had a nameplate beneath it, and a date. Some were names Matteo recognized from suppressed texts: blasphemers, heretics, scientists who disappeared after questioning doctrine. Others were unknown. One bore only a symbol, the serpent glyph again, this time surrounded by smaller characters, all spiraling inward toward the center. He approached the well. It was utterly dark, not black dark, the kind that seems to absorb sound. He dropped a coin inside. It didn't clink, it didn't land, it simply vanished. And then, faintly from the bottom, he heard something, a voice, no louder than a breath, speaking in his own voice. Archivum. Silent I. ... Nan dormit. The archive of silence does not sleep. Matteo recoiled, but the voice came again, louder still, his own. Archivum silent I. ... Memonate. The archive of silence. Remembers, the mirror had reflected a future. The steps had led to a vault, and now the vault whispered with his mouth. He wasn't just inside the archive anymore. He was becoming part of it. Behind him, something shifted. A scraping noise. One of the masks had fallen, or jumped. It was the weeping one. Its tears now real, staining the stone with black streaks. Matteo reached toward it, unsure why. And as his fingertips brushed the edge of the wooden cheek, a sensation stabbed through his skull, not pain, but memory, not his. He saw a man, robed in white, dragged through a torchlit hallway, heard the chant of monks as doors slammed shut, felt cold iron pressed against skin, saw ink smeared onto a page he had not written, and then he was back, staggering, drenched in sweat, knees shaking. The mask was dry, the tears gone, but now he understood. These weren't masks, they were vessels, prisons for souls, memories contained and displayed like artifacts. This wasn't an archive of paper, it was an archive of people. Each one who had uncovered too much had been stored. And suddenly, the whisper made sense. The archive does not sleep, because these memories never die. They're kept cataloged. And sometimes, if you listen too closely, replayed. Matteo turned to leave. He had enough proof, enough dread, enough to report to someone, though, who he didn't know, who would believe him, who would want to. He took 3 steps toward the spiral path, and then the lantern went out, not flickered, extinguished. The air pulled it dead, like a snuff of breath from a mouth that wasn't his, and in that perfect dark, he heard the well again, not a voice. This time, a sound movement, like something rising, climbing, not fast, but inevitable. He didn't wait. Matteo sprinted back up the corridor, slamming his shoulder into the walls as he tripped, scrambled, climbed. The stone scraped his palms. The air grew thinner, but he could feel it behind him, not chasing, just coming. He reached the first chamber. The mirror was blank again. No reflection, but a sound echoed from it. The same breath, the same chant. Archivum. Silent I. ... Nan dormit. And now the voices were multiplying. Dozens of them, all his, each whispering a different phrase. You should not have seen. You should not have touched. You were meant to forget. Matteo backed away, turned, ran for the stairs that led to the original door. But the wall was gone, sealed. Where there had once been a wooden door, with a serpent-shaped keyhole, there was now only smooth stone, seamless, mocking. He was locked in. No. Worse, he had become part of it. The archive hadn't imprisoned him. It had absorbed him above ground. Morning broke over the dome of St. Peter's. Rome yawned. Bells rang. The faithful gathered for Mass, and Brother Matteo d'Alverna was listed as missing. A brief note in the abbey logs. Nothing dramatic. Just another soul lost to illness, or travel, or quiet heresy. The Vatican moved on, but below, the archive, breathed in one more masks, one newly added, was nailed gently into the wall. It bore no expression, just eyes, open, watching. Sleep gently. My friends, but know this, sometimes, history isn't written, it's stored. Sometimes, it doesn't. Sleep. It waits. And sometimes, when silence grows too heavy, it speaks with your voice. Until next time. A place beneath the Vatican where books bleed, masks weep, and mirrors do not reflect. Now the way out is gone, and something ancient has begun to wake. Tonight, we go deeper still, so wherever you are, pause for a breath. Let the hum of the night settle around you. And if you hear a whisper echo your name, don't answer not yet. It might not be you. It might be what's remembering you. Time did not pass in the archive the way it did above. Brother Matteo didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He simply existed, locked between breath and panic, between walls that no longer seemed, made of stone, but of memory. Not his, not entirely, but crawling up from beneath, thick as smoke, and the masks watched. He counted them. There were now 30-7. When he had first entered the second chamber, there had only been 36. The new one was silent, expressionless, except, now and then, its eyes followed him. For the first day, or what felt like when he tried to retrace his steps, not to escape. That was no longer an option, but to understand. To make sense of the architecture of madness the spiral staircase had vanished. The mirror no longer flickered, and the well in the center of the second vault had gone still. But the scrolls, they remained, only now some were open. Matteo hadn't opened them, and yet they breathed faintly in the darkness, parchment fluttering with no breeze. He approached one. Its text was written in shifting script Latin at first glance, but changing when he tried to read it. Letters rearranged, words melted, and slowly they formed his handwriting, page after page, in his script. And they told his story, not as it had happened, but as it was going to. One line made him stop. When he begins to forget the sound of bells, the archive will begin to write him anew. He closed his eyes, concentrated, tried to remember the morning bells of St. Peter's, the chime, the echo, but the sound was gone. He couldn't recall it, not clearly, just a dull ache, like a memory wrapped in cotton. And that's when he realized, the archive wasn't just keeping him here, it was rewriting him, turning him from witness into artifact, from archivist into entry. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, chanting began, soft, hollow, not Latin, not Gregorian, older, slower. The words didn't carry, they lingered, and with them came the return of the footsteps, the ones from before, measured, wet, not running, not pacing, but walking like someone on their way to open a very important book. Matteo backed away, pressing himself into a corner. The masks didn't help, they stared, hollow-eyed, some now murmuring faint syllables beneath their breathless lips. Others simply wept, but none blinked, because blinking would mean they were alive. And in this place, that was worse. Then a noise, soft dot, delicate, but precise, scraping. He turned. It came from the wall beside the well. A crack, just above the floor, had begun to widen, not naturally, as if something on the other side was digging through. A long, slender fingernail. Then another. Matteo did not scream. He didn't run, he simply watched, as the stones peeled away like rotting fruit, and through the gap, he sighs, not human, but familiar, not two, but many, layered like pearls inside a shell, shifting, blinking at random, yet in rhythm. Watching the face attached to those eyes didn't emerge, only the idea of it, like something, half-dreamed, half-formed, waiting for permission. Then it whispered, "You opened the seal. You remember, and now, we remember you." The wall sealed again. The eyes withdrew, but something was left behind. A book, small, bound in a material. Matteo didn't recognize. It looked almost alive, and burned into its cover. The same glyph, the serpent. This time pierced by a key, the moment his fingers touched it. The masks fell silent. The room exhaled, and something in the air clicked as if a lock, untouched for centuries, had finally decided to turn. The book opened on its own, not violently. Just enough for a name to rise from its first page. Archivist 0. No date, no origin. Just that title. The page turned. This time, a sketch, crude, charcoal, but unmistakable. The mirror, the well, the masks, and in the center, not Matteo, but someone else. Robe draped over skeletal shoulders, eyes stitched, mouth sealed, holding a quill not made of feather, but bone. And beneath the image, he who writes the memory of those who knew too much. Matteo blinked, and the image changed. Now the figure looked like him. Same eyes, same hands, holding the same bone quill. The archive wasn't punishing him, it was promoting him. There was a movement behind the well. This time, not a footstep, not a scrape, but a rising, like something that had been seated for centuries now, deciding to stand. The room grew warmer, the air heavier, and one by one, the masks turned toward Matteo, all at once. Not just facing, but bowing, and in that moment, the realization came. There was no escape, not because he was trapped, but because the archive had found a new archivist, one who had read the wrong words, in the wrong order, with just the right curiosity. The chanting resumed, but now, it was in his ears, inside, not out. He recognized the rhythm, his heartbeat. He was being rewritten, not as a man but as a function. His skin itched, his fingers twitched, and when he looked down, the tips of his nails had begun to darken, as if ink was bleeding from within. The book pulsed in his hands, and he opened to the final page. There, a mirror drawn in black and white, his face reflected, eyes wide, mouth silent, and beneath it, the archive welcomes its own. Above ground, the Vatican prepared for Easter. Candles lit, choirs rehearsed. Pilgrims lined the steps, unaware that below their feet, beneath centuries of marble, art, and holy silence, something had changed. The archive had found its new voice, and in the quietest part of its lowest vault, a mirror stood now, no longer blank. It reflected a man seated, writing, with a quill that was no longer made of bone, but of something darker, sharper, and the ink didn't come from a well. It came from his veins. Sleep now, friends, but if you dream of dark staircases, of masks that weep, of books that write themselves in your own hand, no, some archives are not built to preserve history. They are built to revise it. And if you ever find yourself in a place where mirrors lie and voices echo in your own cadence, don't read, don't touch, and whatever you do, don't remember, because if you remember, so will it. Not lost, not killed, something more permanent. Chosen. The archive beneath the Vatican had begun to absorb him, not in violence, but in purpose, as if the walls needed memory, as if silence required a voice. And so, tonight we return to the shadow, beneath the basilica, to the well of ink that never dries, to a world built not of stone, but of secrets, still listening. So close your eyes, just for a moment. Let your room fade, because down here names echo longer than prayers, and the past isn't over. It's just waiting for its next sentence. It had been 3 days. Officially, the Vatican registered Brother Matteo d'Alverna as missing discreetly. A slip in the records. His room was cleaned, his belongings reassigned. No notice posted. Number questions asked. The monks who knew him best didn't ask where he'd gone, because those who worked near the archives knew the rules. You never entered the lower vaults alone, and you never opened anything marked with the serpent glyph. But the rules had been broken, and the archive had stirred high above the vaults. In the apostolic library, Archivist Lucia Moretti ran her fingers across an old papal decree. Her morning had been ordinary, caffeinated, quiet, until a book appeared on her desk. Unscheduled, undelivered. Its cover was raw, leather that felt like skin. No title, just a seal in wax dash broken inside, Only one page was filled. Her name, Lucia. Nothing else. No salutation. No ink signature. Just her name, written in a style she recognized as her own handwriting, and beneath it, pressed into the bottom corner of the page, the serpent, Glyph. Lucia had never met Brother Matteo, but she'd heard of him mostly in whispers. A historian turned monk. Sharp eyes, fast pen, always in the wrong section of the library. Always one step from heresy. She closed the book and stood. She didn't report it. She didn't notify her superior. Instead, she walked quietly, but with purpose, through the narrow staircase that led beyond the marble halls, past the barred door no one mentioned, down where the air grew colder, older, to the locked chamber known simply as the sub-library. The door was ajar. That alone would have warranted alarm. No one left that door open. It had been locked for centuries. The only key was held by the prefect of Archives, who was currently at a symposium in Geneva, and yet Lucia pushed the door wider. Dust, stone, a familiar scent of myrrh and decay. It wasn't quite silence that greeted her. It was listening, the kind of hush that feels poised on the edge of speech, as if the walls wanted her to say something first. And as her footsteps echoed, a second echo followed. Not hers, just a half-step behind. She found the stairs, not the polished ones from tourist wings. These were raw stone, stained in places, chiseled by hand, and down they went. Further than she expected. Further than should be possible. With every step, the air changed, like descending through the layers of time itself. And then a chamber, dim cold, scrolls lined the walls, but not in order. Not categorized. Some floated. Others pulsed faintly, ink shimmering under breathless light. In the center, a desk, not modern, not even medieval stone, carved, and at it, seated in complete stillness, a man. He looked up. Lucia froze. The man's face was pale, his eyes too wide, his robes too dark. Ink dripped from his sleeves like blood from a wound, and his fingers clutched a quill not made of feather but bone. "Welcome," he said. His voice was wrong, familiar, and yet distant. "Brother Matteo." The man tilted his head. "No," he said softly. "Not anymore." And then he smiled just once. Not kindly, not cruelly, but like someone who remembered her from a dream she hadn't had yet. "You shouldn't be here," he continued. Rising slowly, Lucia backed toward the stairs. But they weren't behind her anymore. The door had vanished. The chamber had expanded now. Walls stretched far beyond sight. Scrolls spiraled into columns. Masks watched from alcoves. And the mirror stood at the far end, its surface rippling faintly. "You opened your page," he said. Lucia held up the book. "I didn't. It came to me." He nodded. "That's how it begins." She should have run, should have screamed, but instead, she asked, "Begins what?" The man Matteo, not Matteo, gestured to the walls. "The archive writes, what is remembered. It stores what is dangerous. It preserves what must not die." Lucia felt her pulse race. "This isn't part of the Vatican library." He shook his head. "This is older. The Vatican is the appendix. We are the spine." She stared. "You're saying this place is alive?" "No," he replied. "I'm saying it's aware." The ink on his hands moved, not dripped, moved. It crawled, up his wrists, toward his throat. Lucia stepped back. "This place, what does it want?" The archivist tilted his head again. "It doesn't want. Pause. It remembers." And then the mirror flared, not with light, but with memory. Lucia turned toward it. Saw a reflection, but not hers. Saw a girl, younger, in Rome, on a summer day. A book open in her lap. A strange page of forbidden one read, aloud by accident, and a voice echoing faintly even now. "One day, it will return to you." Her voice died as a child, speaking the words she had forgotten, until now. "You were marked," the archivist whispered. Lucia shuddered. "Why me?" "Because you read. You remember, you ask questions." He stepped closer. And because the archive chose you before you knew what it was. Lucia stared at the mirror. The memory faded. Now it reflected a scroll blank, slowly, filling in her handwriting. Writing itself, a new entry. Her name at the top. She tried to tear her gaze away, but couldn't. The archivist's voice shifted now. Longer human, deeper, layered. As if multiple voices spoke at once. Do you hear it yet? Lucia nodded, because she did. The chanting, it wasn't in Latin. It wasn't even in words. It was the sound of remembering the past, folding in the future, folding out. And in the center, her then came the pain. Not from outside, from within, as if her memories were being threaded, rewritten, her childhood journals, her college thesis, her favorite novels, all burning in reverse, and in their place. New entries, dates that hadn't happened, people she hadn't met, rooms she had never seen, yet would, and in all of them, the glyph, the serpent dot coiled, watching. She dropped the book, it landed open, and a voice familiar rose from it. Lucia, soft, breathless. Her mother's voice. Lucia froze. Her mother had died 5 years ago. She picked the book back up, and there, written in the margins, a message. Don't let them make you forget me. The archivist's eyes dimmed. You must choose, he said. Become what I am. What the archive requires. Or let it erase you. Lucia held the book tightly. What if I refuse? He paused. You won't. Why? Because curiosity is louder than fear. And with that, he vanished into the shelves, as if the archive had absorbed him again. Lucia was alone, but not really. The mirror still watched. The scroll still breathed. And now, so did the ink on her hands. A single line appeared on her wrist, black dot fresh dot a title. Archivist, 2 above. The bells of St. Peter's rang out. Easter morning. Trumpets, smoke, joy. The Pope spoke to thousands, but beneath the marble. The archive stirred. New shelves grew in silence. New names etched themselves in languages no longer spoken, and in the vault's heart, a second desk had appeared, empty, waiting. Sleep lightly, friend, for the archive is awake, and it has begun to catalog the living. If a book appears on your desk with no sender, don't open it. If a mirror doesn't reflect your face, turn it around. And if you hear your name whispered in a place you thought empty, run, unless of course you'd rather. Remember. Archivist Lucia stepped through a door that wasn't supposed to open. What she found below was not a man, but a function. Not a vault, but a memory. Not death, but recruitment. The archive had spoken. Now it waits for her to speak back. So tonight, return with me to the stone beneath Vatican marble, where scrolls whisper, where memory is contagious, and where the only way out is to become part of the story that's already being written. One breath, one name, one revelation at a time. Don't be afraid of the dark. Be afraid of what remembers you in it. Lucia did not return to her room that night, or the next. Instead, she stayed beneath, in the lower archive, where the air no longer felt like air, but like language. She didn't sleep. She didn't need to. The archive wouldn't let her. Forget what she'd seen. The mirror still reflected versions of her that hadn't yet existed, and sometimes very faintly reflected someone else entirely. The desk where Matteo once sat had gone cold. His robe remained draped across the back of the chair, though no footsteps echoed from the shelves. His inkpot was full, though no hand touched it. Lucia now sat at her own desk, and the quillet's tip darkened. Pulsing with ink not drawn from wells rested silently beside her, waiting above her. The Vatican moved on. A cardinal was found dead. In the gardens, his body folded strangely. No wounds, no marks. His mouth stuffed with pages that, when examined, bore writing in no known language, one that shimmered and shifted. Even after burning, no announcement was made. The Vatican's response was quiet, contained internally. It was called a spiritual disturbance. Officially, it never happened. Lucia's days blurred, if they could even be called days anymore. Time inside the archive bent, twisted, flowed in strange loops. Some scrolls she passed were warm, others frostbitten to the touch. Doors appeared, then vanished. Some led to alcoves filled with masks. Others led to nothing, a drop into blank. Breathing shadow. And one she dared not open whispered to her in her father's voice. He had died before she was born, but he knew her name. Her reflection had changed. She no longer cast a clear image in the mirror. Instead, she cast a sequence, a pattern. It shimmered faintly in colors she couldn't name when she moved. It moved with her, but not always in sync. Sometimes it smiled too soon. Other times, it stayed still. When she turned her head, it was no longer a mirror. It was an echo of something deeper than glass. One scroll, in particular, refused to let her pass. It hovered in front of her shelf, like a sleeping bird, trembling slightly. Its ribbon fluttered, though there was no wind, and its seal bore a symbol she hadn't seen before. Not the serpent, not the key, but an eye, lidless, slit-pupilled, ringed in thorns. When she unrolled it, her name was at the top, but not in Latin, in something older, cuneiform. No, not quite. The symbols curled, shifted, and then began translating themselves in her mind, not in words, but in smells, memories, and temperature. She tasted smoke. She heard her childhood cat meow behind her, and she smelled the exact almond vanilla perfume her grandmother used to wear, though she hadn't thought of it in 20 years. That was when she understood. The archive did not remember through ink. It remembered through sense, through sensation, through identity. It didn't just store history, it stored you. And the more time you spent within it, the more it filed you, not in documents, not on shelves, but in other people's dreams. Lucia turned to leave, but the corridor behind her had shifted. The walls breathed slightly, like a cathedral, exhaling, and the ink on her arm deepened. Now it ran along her forearm in a single spiraling line of glyphs. She didn't remember when it had spread, but she wasn't surprised. The ink wasn't tattooed. It was written from within. That night, where the passage that resembled it, Lucia finally saw the room. It did not announce itself. There was no special doorway, no threshold of divine recognition. It simply appeared at the end of a corridor that hadn't been there an hour ago. She stepped in. The air was electric. Dry dot, like lightning, paused in mid-dashbolt, and in the center, a dais, circular black stone, marked with spiraling glyphs that shifted under her eyes. Hovering above it, a book dot, unwritten dot blank dot, but waiting. Lucia stepped forward. The ink on her arm flared. The room darkened. The dais hummed faintly, vibrating beneath her feet like a heartbeat through old stone. Then a voice, not from the air, from within her, right? It wasn't a request. It wasn't a command. It was a law. And so she stepped to the dais, took the quill in her hand, and opened the book. It whispered a sound like teeth clicking underwater. And as she pressed quill to parchment, her memory bled. Out dot, she wrote, without looking. Her hand moved faster than thought, and on the page, the day her brother drowned, the whisper her mother gave her just before dying, the scent of the first library she ever entered, the number of steps between her childhood, home, and the postbox secrets she'd never told anyone, names she had never known she knew. Each word appeared not in ink, but in color-subtle hues that shimmered as though layered in oil and glass. And when the final sentence curled into place, the room blinked. She was not alone. Around the dais, figures had gathered. Tall, hooded, motionless, not masked, faceless but present, and in unison, without breath or sound. They bowed. Lucia did not speak. She only closed the book, turned, and walked back into the shelves, no longer as a visitor, but as a librarian above. Strange things continued to happen. The dead cardinal's body vanished from its tomb. 2 acolytes spoke in perfect Sumerian for 3 hours, then fell silent forever. One night, every clock in the apostolic palace ran backwards for 7 minutes. No explanation. No electrical fault. And in the Sistine Chapel, a crack appeared in the ceiling. Tiny hairline. but exactly through the eye of God. Cardinal Bellari took notice. He had been a keeper of secrets for decades. He knew about the archive, not all of it, but enough. He had never dared go below, until now. He did not tell his aides. He did not bring a guard. He simply brought a crucifix, a bottle of holy water, and a set of keys carved from olive wood. He descended the same stairwell Lucia had taken, and within minutes, was never seen again. But that same evening, new scroll appeared on Lucia's shelf, bound in crimson, twine, and labeled, Bellari. G. Sleep is thin now, friend, because the archive grows, with every breath, with every forgotten whisper, with every dream you don't quite remember when you wake. It's not just beneath the Vatican anymore. It's in the gaps between your thoughts. It's in the corners of libraries you never noticed before. And one day, book will appear for you. No title, no sender, just a seal, and a single page that knows your name. What you do next will not be your decision. Archive claimed Cardinal Bellari, not loudly, not cruelly, just quietly. A red ribbon, a new scroll. A name transferred from the breathing world into the realm of remembrance. And in the room with no ceiling, beneath a Vatican built on borrowed time, Lucia wrote not as herself, but as something that remembered more than she ever lived. And so tonight, we descend again, not into darkness, but into memory, misfiled. A place where echoes begin before the voice, where truth is not forgotten, but re-indexed, and where the question is no longer what is hidden, but rather, what is waiting to be remembered. Lucia no longer slept. Her eyes closed, yes, but she didn't rest. Instead, she stored memories filtered into her thoughts, some hers, some not. She could no longer tell which day she had entered the archive, or whether it had simply always been part of her. The ink on her arm now reached her shoulder. It pulsed softly with her heartbeat. She hadn't seen the mirror in days, but sometimes, when she passed polished surfaces in the deeper chambers, her reflection paused when she didn't, and only once it smiled, without her dot above. The Vatican was shifting. The whispers had begun. At first, just among the archivists, then the priests, then the guards. Visitors spoke of chills in sunlit corridors, doors that resisted opening, candles that wouldn't stay lit in the Sistine Chapel even under glass. And then came the Gregorian inversion. During a mass, the choir began to chant in reverse, not in jest, not in error. Their mouths moved normally, but the sound played backward notes, unwinding like thread, syllables folding inward. The organ broke. The bells cracked. A single pigeon, trapped inside the basilica's dome, fell dead from the air, its eyes missing. The Pope called for silence. Publicly, nothing was said. Internally, panic began to swell. The archivists were questioned. Surveillance increased. Lucia was summoned twice, but never went. The archive had changed her. She no longer walked with human cadence. Her breath came slower. Her thoughts echoed louder, and she could now hear the scrolls breathe. They exhaled when unrolled. They inhaled when rewritten. And one of them spoke. It wasn't the voice she expected, not Latin, not ancient, not even human, but hers, her voice, older.com. Dispassionate. The scroll glowed as she read. Lucia Moretti, born to remember, trained to forget, rewritten to reveal. The ink writhed on the parchment, forming a perfect spiral that became a staircase. She saw it not with her eyes, but from above, as if her soul hovered over her own story. It ended in one word, a name, Iones. She hadn't heard that name in decades. She'd buried it, wrapped it in grief, and left it behind when she entered the Vatican. Her brother drowned when she was 12. No body found, just his red shoe, floating in the reeds. A memory she'd avoided all her life, and yet on the scroll it wasn't marked as past. It was marked as pending. She dropped the scroll. It slithered shut. Suddenly, the chamber grew too still. The torches dimmed. The ink on her arm recoiled slightly, as though sensing something new, something old. A shadow entered, not human, not shaped, but aware. It hovered at the edge of vision, never quite seen but always noticed, and with it came a voice. whispered through the shelves. The boy was not lost. He was catalogued. Lucia turned. No one stood there. Only the smell of the lake, where her brother vanished. Algae, damp reeds. Leather. She took one step back, and the ground beneath her folded inward. She fell not through air, but through indexing. Each moment blinked past her like a file card. 1995, first confession, lied. 2001, burned her diary. 2014, touched the forbidden page. 2023, said yes to the letter. And finally present, accepted. The quill. She landed softly, as if set down by unseen hands. Before her, a door, wider than any room she'd seen. Its surface was mirrored stone, and carved into it. With exact precision, the room of the unwritten. She didn't open it. She was the key. As she approached, the ink on her arm glowed faintly blue, then violet, then white-hot gold. The door cracked open without touch, and what lay inside was not empty. It was possibility. Scrolls without ink, books without spines, shelves, built of light, and floating in the center of memory. UNASSIGNE. E2 waiting for its host. She stepped forward. The memory unfolded. Her brother, but not drowned, not even dead. Alive, older, untied robes. Darker than hers. Standing inside the archive smiling, but not at her, at someone else. He turned. Behind him, a chamber, a circle of children, eyes closed, quills in hand. Writing. Her brother placed a page on the altar, and looked directly at her. Lucia, he said, but not in greeting, in warning. She blinked. The vision folded inward. The room of the unwritten pulsed once, and sealed shut behind her. When she turned, a corridor had appeared, different. The walls were ribbed with bone-colored shelves. The air was colder, and down the hallway. At the end, the mirror returned. Still watching, her reflection was complete. Now, but not hers. It was him, her brother, IOANNES, smiling. Yes, but with sadness folded at the edges. And behind him, children, faces blurred, quills moving, pages, bleeding symbols. She reached for the mirror and her hand passed through, not into glass, but into water. Cold, dark, familiar. The lake, the reeds, the silence. She was a child again, and Iones stood across the water, holding something, a book. He placed it gently on the surface, and it floated toward her. She picked it up, the same one. No title, just a seal. This time, the glyph wasn't the serpent. It was her own eye. Open.unblinking. She gasped and came to, back in the chamber. But now, she remembered Iones wasn't lost. He had been taken, not by death, but by selection. A child chosen by the archive, given a role, a function, a story that no longer fit within the living. And she had been given the same path, the same ink. And now, she knew where it ended, or rather where it continued, above. The Vatican was fracturing, rooms misaligned, priests forgot their names mid-sermon. A marble statue of St. Paul bled from the eyes only, for 1 minute, just long enough to be captured in the mind of one trembling tourist. And then the trumpets began. Not real ones, not heard by all, but deep within the skulls of the clergy. Low, dissonant, predictable. Once every 7 hours, 17 minutes, and 4 seconds. No origin, no explanation, just presence. The Pope was said to be ill, confined to his chambers. But some, whispered he, was speaking in reverse, and that when he opened his mouth, dust fell out, back beneath the marble. Lucia walked the lowest shelves now, past doors that no longer had locks, past archivists, who no longer had faces. She did not fear them. They bowed when she passed, not out of reverence, but out of recognition. She had become something else, something between reader and remembered, and now, her quill no longer required parchment. She wrote into people, names, fates, corrections, and the archive recorded it all, in echoes, in dreams, and soon. In you, sleep deeply if you can. But should your dream begin in Latin? Should the mirror at the end of the hall reflect a version of you holding a quill? Know this, the archive is expanding. and some shelves are built behind your eyes. Lucia reached the room of the unwritten. She saw what the archive kept, even from itself. Her brother, taken but not lost. A circle of children rewriting time. A mirror no longer showing future or past, but a version of her that existed only inside. Memory rendered real. Now the archive doesn't simply remember, it amends. And those who live above, they are only as safe as they are unnoticed. But something has noticed, and tonight, we return not down a staircase, but through a crack, a hairline fracture in faith. A breach in the idea that some things were ever truly forgotten. Dim the lights not to sleep, but to see more clearly. Because the archive has begun to write in light. The Vatican walls are sweating. Marble that once gleamed with holy oil now glistens with something else. Cold, damp, almost viscous. The statues tremble not from quakes, but from memory misapplied. A nun walks past a stained glass window and sees herself on it. Bleeding from the mouth, crown of thorns slipping sideways. She screams, but no sound escapes. In the papal archives, 3 scribes go blind, not from light, but from something inside their eye script, unwinding across their retinas. Each letter branded not in Latin, but in something deeper. Glyphs that hum, one scribe mutters. Before he collapses, we are the notes in a song already sung. Above-ground responses escalate. Security increases. Doors are chained. Holy relics are examined. One is found missing, not stolen. Erased. Its glass case intact. Alarm untouched. But the object is gone. A reliquary, said to contain the index finger of Saint Clement. The plaque remains, but the finger does not in its place. A feather-old, white but not avian. Too long, too jointed, bending slightly, as if listening meanwhile. Lucia walks. The archive has shifted again. Its shelves no longer straight, no longer wooden. Some spiral upward into infinite loops. Others curve back toward themselves, creating aisles where she walks in and out of her own thoughts. And now, the air is warm, alive. Some pages flap softly as she passes, as if breathing. Others flutter open on their own, revealing names that blink, like stars. She doesn't read them, she knows what they are. People not yet born, already filed, already indexed. A door opens ahead, it wasn't there before. She enters inside, a classroom. Stone benches, candles floating above each seat, a blackboard that writes itself. And seated before her children, eyes wide, silent, each holding a quill, each arm tattooed in symbols she now recognizes, her own included. And at the head of the room, her brother, Ioannes. Older now, hair silvered, eyes soft, but firm. He smiles, she doesn't. He speaks first. I told you you'd come. You just had to forget the world first. Lucia walks to him. They don't embrace. They stand. Not as siblings, but as echoes of the same original sound. 2 notes from a buried melody. She finally asks, "Why me?" He gestures to the children. They stare straight ahead, still breathing but only slightly. You were remembered. That's all it takes. He steps aside. The chalk moves again. One phrase writes itself. The index must balance. Lucia doesn't know what it means yet, but she feels the weight of it in her bones. Back upstairs. The world begins to slip. A bishop forgets his own name, mid-mass. The congregation doesn't notice because they forget theirs. TOOA. Chalice begins to hum, not a tune, a frequency, low, subliminal, impossible. Only the deaf can hear it. They begin, weeping. One cries out in perfect Akkadian, another claws at their own ears until they bleed golden dust. Vatican radio is hijacked. No hackers, no signal breach. Just static hand behind it, chanting, played backward, then forward, then all at once. Listeners. Go mad. 1. Cardinal jumps into the Tiber, screaming about pages stitched from sky. He leaves no ripples, only the smell of old parchment. Lucia has stopped. Aging, her hands still move. Her hair still falls, but her breath is too steady. her pulse too slow. The archive is preserving her, not in body, in function. She writes now with her eyes dot, with her steps, with her silence, and above all, with permission. She no longer chooses what to record. She simply allows it, and the world, in turn, obliges. The Pope vanishes. The guards say he was in his chambers. Then he wasn. No alarms, no alums, no blood. Only a folded page on his bed, blank on both sides, but warm, still pulsing faintly. And when the cardinals open the Vatican Codex to look for a prophecy that might explain what's coming, the text has rearranged. The Latin is gone, replaced by a spiraling glyph. Just one. Lucia recognizes it. So does Ioannes. So do you. It's the shape that appeared in your dream last night, the one you couldn't quite draw when you woke up, the one still hiding behind your eyes, in the archive. Lucia descends again. Not stairs this time, not ladders, just a long hallway of reflections. Each one not a mirror, but a moment. She walks past the memory of her first lie, her first fall, her first page, then past moments that aren't hers. A mother, crying beneath a ruined bell tower. A king carving his name into his own tongue. A librarian setting herself on fire so no one could read what she had learned. All moments, all stored, all waiting. She reaches the last pane. It's dark, but it's moving. She steps through now. She stands in a circular room, at its center. A pedestal on it. A new book unopened, thicker than the others. Made not of paper, but of skin. It breathes, slightly rises, and falls. Lucia approaches. No quill needed. Her hands tremble, and the book opens. Itself inside: one page, blank, then her own voice. Inside her head, write the next world. She hesitates, then something behind her moves. Not seen, not known, but felt. A presence too large to inhabit. Shape, older than breath. Wearing silence like a cloak, it whispers. Without sound, she doesn't turn, but she understands. She was never the author, only the pen, and now, the archive needs an update. She begins. Each word drips from her fingers, like honeyed blood. Not Latin, not English, but something more basic. Intention, she writes. No more silence. No more forgetting. No more fear of what has always known us. She writes until her arms glow, until her eyes flicker with symbols, until the ceiling above splits and light floods. Down but not sunlight. Script light, a glow made of language, of recognition, of surrender, and in the world above. The statues stop trembling. The bells toll forward again. The windows repair. But one thing is different subtly, permanently. The books. All books, in every library, school, church, and home. They are one sentence longer. Added without printing, without ink, without anyone noticing until now. And the sentence. You'll know it when you read it. You already have. It's the sentence that made your spine tingle. The one you didn't remember highlighting. The one that wasn't there yesterday. Lucia closes the book. It exhales. The room seals, and now she walks not as a scribe, not even as a function, but as the record. Itself, she no longer belongs to the archive. The archive now belongs to her, and in the Vatican above. One final bell tolls. It is not on any tower. It has no clapper. It rings only in the bones. And tonight you heard it. Lucia wrote the next world, not in ink, not on paper, but in presence. Each word a ripple, each silence a drum, each breath a line carved into the memory of everything that ever was. Now, the archive no longer hides beneath Rome, it breathes through it. And tonight, the story no longer walks quietly down stone halls. It walks into you. So lie back, let the dust settle gently around your thoughts, because this ending doesn't forget, it remembers you. 2. Above ground, the Vatican awoke to stillness. The sun rose, but not all at once. It hesitated, paused behind the dome, as if reading the day's script. When it finally spilled over the marble, shadows no longer behaved correctly. They bent the wrong way. Crosses leaned eastward. Columns shimmered in their own shade. and every clock struck 7:17. Even the broken ones. Even the digital ones. Even the ones unplugged since the 1970s. The world outside noticed. Not loudly, not at first, but in those quiet, unspoken ways. Librarians in Madrid awoke speaking Greek they didn't know. A little girl in Canada dreamt of a scroll she'd never seen and began drawing it in perfect Akkadian glyphs. A deaf man in Nairobi began to hear again. But only inside dreams. Only when it rained, and only the sound of pages. Turning Lucia had become something else. She no longer walked. She unfolded. Each movement extended the archive across the invisible seams of the world. Her eyes saw not faces, but citations. Moments.edits. Her fingers could pluck memories from people. As easily as one tucks a bookmark between pages. And she did not do so cruelly. She did it gently, like a librarian. Reshelving a book someone had. Misplaced in grief. She returned to the marble halls. But the Vatican was no longer just stone. It was now living parchment. The frescoes shifted subtly. Not visibly, but if you turned your head too quickly. The saints seemed to watch closer. The altar whispered. The pews breathed. Candles flickered in rhythm with heartbeats, no longer present. And beneath it all, the archive pulsed like a second heart. Lucia entered the Sistine Chapel. It was empty, except for a child he was reading. Not a Bible, not scripture. A scroll old, cracked, but warm in his lap. She sat beside him, said nothing. He did not look up after a moment. He whispered, "I saw your name in here." She asked, gently, "What does it say?" He didn't answer with words. He turned the scroll, held it up. It was blank, but her name glowed in reverse. Not Lucia, but a cule, a mirror, a palindrome, a clue, and then a rumble, not from the earth, from the air, low vibrating, as if a choir had begun singing inside the walls of the world. Not a warning, not a threat, a summoning. It came from the oldest part of the Vatican, older than the archive, older than Rome, older than writing. Lucia walked, the walls grew colder, and ahead, a staircase with no end. Downward, carved, not of stone, but of bone. She descended. The light changed, not dimmed, changed colors. She couldn't name floated beside her. Letters she'd never seen flickered against the steps, each one a piece of a word spoken only once, at the beginning of memory itself. When she reached the bottom, she saw it. Not a chamber, not a tomb, a circle, massive, massive, endless, floating in the air. Made entirely of unwritten moments, unmade mistakes, untaken paths, unspoken apologies, unlived lives. They spun, slowly, endlessly, and in the center, a quill. Suspended dripping ink made of regret. This was the core, the place even the archive dared not enter lightly. The source of all revision, and it was unstable. Lucia felt it in her bones, in her past, in her future. The archive was full, overwritten. Too many edits, too many removals. It was cracking, and the world would fracture with it, unless someone rewrote the final page. Not a person, not a god, but a rememberer, and Lucia had been chosen. Not because she was worthy, but because she still remembered. Loss. The quill moved toward her. She did not reach it near her hand. It burned cold, and without being told what to write, she began. She wrote the first tear her mother shed. She wrote the hunger her brother died with. She wrote the unspoken words, between priests and silence. She wrote the prayers whispered by people who didn't believe in them. She wrote everything that had no page, and with every word. The spinning circle slowed. The unwritten was being filed, catalogued, accepted, and as the last line etched itself, "We are remembered not by being seen, but by being written," the circle folded. Not violently, not loudly, just completely. It became a book. It dropped gently into her hands, bound in silence, warmed by memory. The archive had closed, not destroyed, preserved, at last. And then came the hush, a silence so complete that even thought had to whisper. Lucia stood alone now, but not empty. She had become the memory, a vessel, a final library built in breath, back on the surface. People remembered things that never happened. An old woman in Peru smiled and said, "I think I dreamt her name." A child in Ghana painted a face she'd never seen. And a monk in Kyoto opened an old box and found a single feather. Not from a bird, but from a quill. He lit incense and wept. Not from fear, but from recognition. And you, tonight, you dream differently. The images are clearer. You walk halls you've never entered, yet know by heart. You pass shelves, each one bearing your name. You see her just once turning a page that feels like yours. You do not speak, you do not breathe. But you are not afraid, because in the silence, she writes, "You are filed under hope." Lucia is gone now. Not dead, not lost. Just catalogued somewhere deeper. No, longer visible, but always present. When a book falls open to just the right line, that's her. When a letter arrives with no signature, that's her. When a name returns to your mind after decades, that's her. And when you wake up knowing something you didn't go to sleep, knowing that is the archive still whispering, still writing, still watching. The Vatican never recovered. Not entirely. Some doors refused to stay closed. Some rooms refused to exist during daylight. The archivists were all replaced, except one. An old man with no tongue, who walks the marble every night, humming backwards lullabies. If you ever visit, don't follow him. Just bow and whisper, "I remember her," because she remembers you. And in the silence between seconds, in the hush before dreams, in the blink before memory stirs, she is still writing. And this story, it was never fiction, just a classified truth, filed, indexed, and now returned.